Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Admiration. I am super excited this week because we are looking at an ad for Dove from the Campaign for Real Beauty, which is an amazing campaign which I've personally enjoyed and admired and spent much time learning about over the whole of the last 20 years because I'm old enough to have enjoyed every single ad. And it's really nice to look at the new one and how they've evolved the campaign and see how people respond to it. So shall we jump straight in, Isa, and have a look at the ad?
Yeah, let's do it.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look, and you'll see into your imagination. What we'll see will defy explanation. If you wanna be in paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Wanna change the world, there's nothing to it. There is no life I know to compare with your imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be.
Wow, that was quite uplifting. I do love that they call them all films, and it feels like for once they're probably people who can justify and do get to call them films because the best ads are like mini films, they do all of the same wonderful things in terms of taking you on those journeys. Shall we jump into the results and see what people think?
There you go. The power of that ad comes through on the sales impact score and the brand impact score. And whilst when when the Super Bowl was out, we talked about the Dove ad that was launched then, and it was speaking very much to um, young girls in sport and how actually what sets them back is body confidence rather than like the knocks they take within their sports, and perhaps even the fact that a lot of sports are dominated by boys. It's more the fact that they're not actually confident in their own bodies, and that we saw quite a divide in terms of who resonated most with the ad. It was mostly women that were actually driving the high scores. Here we're seeing universal appeal for it. I guess the topic of AI and how it's impacting society at the moment, and in this case, particularly beauty standards, hit home not just for women, but for men as well.
Yeah, and I think you can see that in the kind of the overall emotion, but also the kind of relevance type scores. Like it's highly relatable because they've really, as you've just said, tapped into something that's highly topical, but also hugely relevant, I guess, to the campaign, quite literally, that they've been on for 20 years now, in terms of highlighting and trying to improve the view of real beauty in society and stop it being quite so distorted, as we see across the media. Which is quite amazing to see. The other thing that's super interesting for me on this is how often have we seen a 2-minute film that captures people in such a way? Like, that's incredible. People have quite small attention spans these days, and You know, often the longer the ad is, the more that we see people respond perhaps less positively towards it or ask about it being cut down. And of course, many people do. And I'm sure they can, or in fact have now created a wonderful cut down of this. But for a 2-minute film, people are finding it highly enjoyable. The vast majority are sticking with the ad throughout, and they're feeling positive emotions. They're finding it highly relatable. And that's obviously not just the topical content, but the way that it's delivered. So the actual story, the kind of how they've gone about it, the diversity that we see in terms of different body types and all those other wonderful things. So a big pause here, but just those results are truly incredible. And I guess the result of 20 years of, you know, grounding in an evolving insight, and a clear message, and something which is totally real to them, right? You can't inauthentically go after a cause, but everything that they are doing to genuinely change the world, I guess, comes to fruition here. The fact that they could use AI and generate totally different images based on everything they've done for 20 years, really heroing Dove in an authentic way, for me is I'm quite blown away by it, I guess.
Yeah, it's completely believable as well at the start of the ad when they clearly state that all the images were generated by AI. And the fact that the campaign's been around for so long and people are very familiar with it, that message is something that people just kind of like take in and believe straight away. There's no question of whether they were just kind of like plugged in images to fit their message, because Dove have made such a great job at landing that message consistently for years, and putting it this way, and how, I guess, or posing that question of like, how do we want AI to learn information, makes it the extra bit more relatable and powerful to today's world, essentially.
Yeah, it's quite terrifying that we might need more than just the one Dove brand to stop everything heading in its inexorable direction of becoming worse and worse and worse over the years in this particular regard. Quite amazing. And I guess the other thing, just to focus on here, we've talked a lot about consistency, and actually this whole execution wouldn't have worked without that consistency, because it wouldn't have been able to, you know, without enough images from Dove over the years, it wouldn't be able to drive that very different result between AI in general and AI when prompted with Dove. But it's also worth calling out the kind of freshness with which they've delivered it. So they've been on a campaign, they've been on a mission, they've stayed passionate, and they've stayed championing that. But every ad is really contemporary, really topical, really taps into the things of that day and really delivers it in quite an emotive and relatable way, which is to be applauded. 20 years of consistency absolutely doesn't mean boring. Quite the opposite.
Definitely.
Should we dive a bit further? I think probably into the emotions, because yes, it's got everything going for it, but I guess the emotional journey is one of the key things.
Yeah, let's have a look. It's quite an interesting one, because a lot of the times when you see long ads, you don't actually get that many peaks of emotion throughout them, because either people lose interest, or there's kind of big periods of a lull in emotions with them. In this case, well, in the case of this Dove ad, it's absolutely not the case. You see really, really high peaks of love, particularly when the images start coming through of the prompts that are being fed into the AI image generating tool around well, changing those standards of beauty according to Dove campaigns.
Yeah, I think the thing that I loved most when I was watching that was literally, it didn't matter who the image was of, because they fully bought into the whole idea that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes, and real beauty is diverse and all sorts of different types of people. And so every single image that comes up is where you can see that purple peak of love, right? It's not some of the images, it's every single one is kind of met with a virtual round of applause, as it were, and a little beat of the heart.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you
And
can
does
see how
that,
that builds as well. It's almost like the um the presence of the Dove brand in terms of the very clean white background with the Dove symbol already drives a little bit of love to begin with because of that affinity towards the brand, just that's been built over the years, the fact that it's a massively trusted brand, and I guess the equity that it's built as well with its previous campaigns. Almost people know what to expect from an ad from Dove. So you do get a little bit of love and like coming through, but it's obviously not until the true purpose of the ad is revealed that it massively spikes up. But then in the beginning as well, you do see some elements of like surprise building through that orange line. Maybe we get rid of everything else and we just focus on surprise, like, and love to see almost like how close that surprise line is to the like and love in the beginning because of the images that are being generated by the AI tool when you prompt it with things like perfect skin, the most beautiful woman in the world. It's so unrealistic that I think people are a bit shocked at the types of images that are being generated.
yeah, there's the surprise and the dislike every time they see an image generated, which is beautifully then kind of countered in the second half of the ad, where they love every image that the Dove brand
Yeah,
generates. I also really like what you said about the kind of expectation. Like, it's not just brand love, is it? It's the fact that when you open up on that white background with the logo and it's another Dove film, there's already an expectation that they're going to tell a wonderful story,
yeah,
to a better place almost, which is incredible to see. I mean, you mentioned earlier that the ad's really universal, and I think we can all see why. Universally loved, but is there any groups that like love it even more, if that's possible, than
yeah.
everyone else?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you naturally still see that female male divide where women have like higher affinity towards the ad and feel more love towards it. So if we just focus on the love emotion on its own, it's already overwhelming the amount of love that people feel towards the ad. So this 44.4% is the amount of people who selected love as the main emotion they felt watching the ad. Total respondents, both men and women, and compared to the norm for the average US ad, that's significantly above what we see. And then when we break that down between men and women, we see that the core driver of that outperformance are the women, but men are still over-indexing slightly versus what we see on average, which is already reassuring. So it adds to that universal appeal to it, but naturally women relate to it more. And then interestingly, when you break women down into different age groups. So the younger women, 18 to 34, middle-aged around 35 to 49, and then the older women at 50 to 75, you actually see that there's more love towards the younger you are as a woman. And perhaps there's a link there when it comes to that generation being exposed to the impact of technology on beauty standards from a younger age and maybe having a greater impact to how they perceive beauty, beauty standards to be amongst women. And actually, Dove, so their original insight for the Real Beauty campaign came from only 2% of women feeling beautiful. Recently, they did a study and they found out that actually there were a high proportion of women who felt pressured to be prettier than their mother's generation was. And I think this particularly applies to the younger group here, which makes sense that they're receiving this ad quite well. Another point that they found was that 9 in 10 women see harmful content online when it comes to kind of beauty standards and so on. And perhaps that group have just been exposed to that online content for longer in terms of from when they were a lot younger.
Yeah, it's quite scary as society as a whole, really, when you think of the role generations ago that women played in society. You know, they were much less given roles where they could outperform in more academic or those kind of ways. It's quite scary to think that this generation feel like there's even more pressure that goes on looks rather than women delivering in every other way society needs, which is terrifying, I think, for the future generation. And presumably everyone thinks, and that's why this storyline is so relatable and so empowering.
Definitely.
Wonderful. There was one other thing that I wanted to touch on, which was the role of the music.
Yeah.
We've talked quite a lot about, you know, highly relatable, incredibly well told stories, all those wonderful peaks in love every time they see the different image. But the other thing that really struck me is how beautifully they used the music to enhance the story of what was actually going on in the ad. So it kind of drove up to a bit of a crescendo, you know, it built that kind of thing. But there was also moments of pause in the music before it then got going again to accentuate different points and really punctuate that story. It felt quite powerful. Is the music something that other people commented on?
Yeah, it's something that comes through in what people liked about the ad. They talk about how it's very fitting with the message that Dove is trying to convey. It works really well with the narrative in general. Just the tone of it feels right for the ad.
I think it's just super clever because having, you know, worked with many ads over time, music is often an afterthought. So quite often
Yeah.
an ad's been written and then they'll try a couple of tracks on it. It feels like this must have been at the heart of development to find the right piece of music that literally helped them tell their story in a highly emotive way that kept that engagement for the full 2 minutes. And honestly, for anyone to comment on music as a like when there was so much else that they loved about it is quite incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we see that here, like the content delivery aspect of it. So what the ad was trying to convey, how it conveyed it, obviously generated loads of like responses. But as you said, the fact that music comes out as a standalone element is just really impressive and quite strong. So if we look at that, the whole ad was great. The song picked for it is perfect. The images used went really well with the message being sent. It showed a variety of women with different skin, and it was playing a nice song in the background. There were so many comments around it and how it just fit the message so well. In terms of like the element of inclusivity as well, there were so many great comments about how the ad just felt real. They were grateful that Dove continues to portray beauty as something that's very varied, comes in so many shapes and sizes. I love this ad that it's saying a lot is generally hate advertising. It had a genuine and heartwarming tone, and the music was lovely enhancement, truly inspired, well done.
Wow.
Some people even comment about the putting brakes on AI generated stuff. I think people felt very relieved about that final message that Dove put out that they will never use AI generated women to enhance or distort the appearance of women or people in general in their advertising, which people really, really loved.
Yeah, and like you said, totally authentic and credible for the brand, where another brand who hadn't had that consistency, who tried to deliver that message, I guess it would be met with a certain degree of skepticism that we really don't see here.
Yeah, definitely.
Wonderful. On that note, can we just take a little trip back down memory lane and zoom back out again? 20 years is like a really long time to be working with this campaign. And I guess it was quite surprising for me when I realized it was 20 years. But what we're showing here is like on the far side of the slide, we've got the very first ad in the campaign for Real Beauty, which was Evolution. And for many people who are watching who might not remember it, it basically, for its day, was quite shocking because people didn't really understand how much was happening to create artificial beauty online 20 years ago. So it was a real eye-opener. But it showed like a lady walking into the studio looking like she does in that top picture. And then it showed the whole process of changing the lighting and someone coming in and doing her hair and doing her makeup and all of this, which was showing that really what you see online is artificial beauty. And then just as you thought you'd seen all you were going to see, it then moved on to showing all of the editing. So not only was the lighting perfect and the hair and the makeup and everything else, but then every element of her face was adjusted from her nose to her eyes to her mouth to everything else, until the point where almost what was used at the end was unrecognizable from the wonderful lady who started at the beginning of the video. And there was the start of it, and it was highly relevant in that day. We then moved through, and I've just got a couple of others here that I absolutely love and show a bit of an evolution of the campaign. The one in the middle, which was the first time that they tackled a little bit more about what that might mean for young people. Like the first ad obviously woke you up to what was going on. The second one helped you see that we need to do something for the younger generation. And it showed this wonderful little girl who you can see at the top there in the street. And it was called Onslaught because after that, it literally just like zoomed through from her perspective, like everything that she was seeing from the beauty industry, all of these fake images of beauty, all of these made up images, all of these things that would set in her head what beauty was meant to be. And obviously ended with the message to talk to your daughter before the beauty industry does. And then the one on the right, which was just so incredibly clever. So it was called Sketches. And it was basically trying to waken up in women that that they should see themselves more positively. And it was a highly emotive story where they brought a forensic artist in and he couldn't see the women. And what they did was they walked into the room, he couldn't see them, and he would ask questions about them. And they'd describe themselves like, oh, my nose is much bigger than it should be, or I often look a bit frowny, I've got some lines on my forehead, or basically focusing on all the negative aspects. And then what they did was then got another lady to look at the woman or a man and describe what she looked like. And then he drew that. And you can see there's like a huge difference between how a woman described herself and that negativity versus how someone else described her and all of the beauty that came through from there. But just the really powerful ending and the craft that went into that whole story of seeing then how women react to the drawing that was created from their description versus someone else's and how they should be more positive about themselves. That moment is highly, highly emotive. And the degree of craft that went into that ad's incredible. Like even from the first woman, I understand that they revealed what had happened to, and it was too powerful, and she was totally overwhelmed and they couldn't use that part in the ad. So what they learned was with the next women that they had to explain to them what had happened before they actually exposed them to the sketches. So all of that kind of level of detail to create such a compelling and emotional story that really made you think differently. It's quite overwhelming. So a brilliant well done to Dove. And of course, they've done it not just with film, right? Is there? But you know, you were going around and there's a load of content from lots of different channels that works in a really powerful and emotive way for the media in which it will be seen.
Yeah, and they're constantly evolving as well. They're understanding how how women are I guess like reacting to content around beauty and from the beauty industry, their potential challenges with it, and constantly evolving what they're putting out. Like their original Real Beauty static campaign where you saw women of all different shapes, colors, like age groups. At the time was quite shocking because no beauty brand was doing that. All the women in beauty ads looked the exact same. Dove came in and said, we're representing real women and the diversity that actually exists. Nowadays that content has been integrated more so. I mean, we're talking 20 years from now, you'd hope there would have been a change in how the beauty industry is representing women. And for that reason, Dove has also evolved how they talk about real beauty, constantly understanding what's affecting women in real time. So obviously you talked about the original campaign with the Photoshop, and this one here on the right addresses kind of social media filters, which with a click of a button you can change someone's entire appearance, and it is massively damaging. And they addressed it in a really great way, there with multiple different images of different types of girls and women across the board. And even here, just I guess on the bottom left-hand corner, addressing the differences on just the wording that people might use about themselves and how well, yeah, the impact of that. So the fact that this woman here is freckled, and some people might have seen it as flawed, but truly it is flawless. Or like the fact that as you age, you naturally get wrinkles, so rather than withered, it's still very much wonderful to see the signs of age in someone.
Yeah, it's a wonderful message and it's a fantastic campaign. And it's amazing just to see how it's evolved. There's an irony that their first ad was evolution and their entire campaign has been one big evolution for 20 years with the same consistent message, but an ever evolving consumer insight based on what's going on around them. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for your time today, Isa. That was one of my favorites to talk about, and we'll be back next week, hopefully with another incredible ad. Thank you.
We will be. Thank you.